Miss Amara was the kind of teacher every parent dreamed of. She was soft-spoken, incredibly patient, and never ever raised her voice, not even when her students pushed her to her limits. She truly believed that learning wasn't about memorizing rules or fearing punishment. It was about understanding hearts. Her small, cozy classroom was a wonderland of colorful charts, hand-drawn alphabets, and tiny desks where children could giggle and learn without a single ounce of fear. But then, one Monday morning, her entire world shattered. It all started with a little girl named Rita. Rita was a bright child, but so fragile, so easily anxious, and often terrified to answer questions. For weeks, Amara had noticed faint bruises blooming on the child's small arm. One day, she gently knelt down and asked about them. Rita's voice was a whisper. "Mama gets angry." With a heavy heart, Amara quietly reported her concerns to the school counselor, just hoping someone, anyone, would step in to help the little girl. The very next day, Rita's mother stormed into the school. She was wealthy, influential, and absolutely furious. "How dare you accuse me?" she screamed, her voice echoing in the hallway. "You think a low-salary teacher like you has any right to question a mother like me?" Amara tried to explain, her voice calm and steady, that her only concern was for Rita's safety. But the mother wasn't listening. She was there to fight, not to understand. By that evening, the school had received a formal complaint. It claimed Amara was emotionally harming children. There was no investigation, no chance for her to defend herself, not even a meeting, just a cold, crisp letter waiting on her desk, fired, effective immediately. Her colleagues, people she had shared lunches and laughter with, suddenly couldn't meet her eyes. They scurried past, pretending to be busy with paperwork. The principal, the same man who once praised her dedication, quietly handed her a cardboard box filled with her belongings, her favorite markers, some old notebooks, and the coffee mug her students had gifted her. No one said a word. It felt like a funeral. Everyone was present, but no one dared to speak. Walking home, her hands trembled as she clutched the box. Each step felt heavier than the last. She had poured 5 years of her life, her soul, into that school. 5 years of waking up at dawn, writing birthday cards, bringing treats for every single student, wiping away tears and calming their little fears. All of it erased in a single afternoon by one powerful, angry parent. At home, a crushing silence greeted her. She lived alone. Her father had passed away years ago, and her mother, once a pillar of strength, was now bedridden after a severe stroke. The rent for their small house was due in 2 weeks. The cost of her mother's medicine was piling up. And now, she had no job, no savings, and absolutely no idea what to do next. For 2 long nights, she cried silently into her pillow, terrified of waking her sleeping mother, afraid of letting her own despair break through. But on the 3rd morning, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered hesitantly. "Miss Amara?" A deep, unfamiliar voice asked. "Yeah, who is this?" "I saw your profile," the man said. "I need a teacher. Private, full-time. The salary is very good. My son, he cannot attend school. He is different." The voice paused for a long moment before adding, "If you're interested, come for an interview tomorrow. Don't bring any documents, we'll talk face to face. No name, no address. Just a location pin dropped into her messages. It led her to the lonely outskirts of the city, a place of quiet roads, fields of tall, whispering grass, and a silence completely untouched by the noise of traffic. Doubt twisted in her gut. This felt strange, risky, but desperation has a way of making you brave. So she went. When she arrived at the location, she froze. In front of her stood a massive stone mansion, a fortress of modern glass and steel. The iron gates were taller than trucks, and stone-faced guards stood like statues on either side. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a stronghold. She hesitated, a voice in her head screaming at her to turn back and run. But just then, one of the gates creaked open. A guard stepped out and said, "Mr. Hassan is expecting you." Inside, the mansion was eerily silent. There were no servants bustling about, no family voices, no laughter. Just polished marble floors that reflected her nervous face, priceless art hanging on the walls, and dim, somber lighting. She was guided down a long hallway to a room at the very end. A tall, imposing man in a black suit sat at a large desk. He didn't smile. He didn't even introduce himself. "You taught children for 5 years," he said, his voice flat and cold. "But the school let you go. That is unfortunate. My son needs a teacher who does not give up easily." Amara swallowed hard. "Why can't he attend school?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because school does not understand him," the man replied, his tone sharp. "He is autistic. He does not speak, does not look at people, does not respond. But he is intelligent, he just needs someone patient." Something in his tone felt less like a father asking for help and more like a commander giving an order. "You will live here," he continued, his eyes locking onto hers. "Teach only him. No photos, no questions about my business. Your room and food will be provided. The salary, 5 times more than what you earned." 5 times. Her breath caught in her throat. That kind of money could solve everything. It could pay the rent, buy her mother's medicine, and give them a chance to breathe again. It was a lifeline she couldn't refuse. She agreed. The next morning she met Zayan. He was a small 8-year-old boy sitting on the floor meticulously building a tower of blocks. He didn't look up when she entered. He didn't make a sound, but as she got closer, she saw a quiet, deep sadness in his eyes that mirrored her own. Amara sat on the floor beside him and whispered, "Can I build with you?" He didn't answer, but after a moment he pushed a single block toward her. It was a start. Day after day she worked with him. She read stories softly, showed him pictures of animals, drew colorful shapes, and told him tales of faraway lands. And slowly, so slowly, he began to respond. A tiny gesture here, a small, fleeting smile there. One afternoon when she made a silly frog sound, he let out a soft, beautiful laugh. The cold, silent mansion began to feel a little less empty, a little more alive. But as the days turned into weeks, something else started to bother her. Security cameras. They were everywhere. In the hallways, in the classroom they used, even one discreetly placed outside her bedroom door. The feeling of being watched was constant, a heavy blanket she couldn't shake off. Every night she felt the mansion breathing around her, like a silent, waiting beast. And she couldn't escape the terrifying thought that was growing stronger each day. This job didn't just hire her. It had trapped her. Days turned into weeks, and I slowly settled into the mansion's quiet, disciplined routine. Breakfast was at 7. My lessons with Zayan were from 9 until 1. After lunch he had therapy sessions and I had dinner alone. The house was always silent, always controlled, as if emotions were a forbidden language inside its walls. But in those silent days, something beautiful began to bloom. Zayan, who once couldn't even make eye contact, now waited for me every single morning. He'd be sitting cross-legged on the floor, books already open. He still didn't speak, but a shy smile would appear when I walked in. His favorite things were stories about the moon, animals, and the sound of rain. Every time I read to him, he would look up, his eyes wide, as if he were memorizing the sound of my voice. One evening I was teaching him how to write his name. His small hand trembled and he suddenly pressed his palm flat against the page, a wave of frustration washing over him. I gently placed my hand over his. "It's okay," I whispered. "I'm here. Try again." He lifted his eyes, and for the first time, he looked directly at me. It was a long, fragile moment, something his father had told me he'd never done with anyone before. When I told Mr. Hassan about this breakthrough, I was expecting him to be thrilled. Instead, he just gave a cold, dismissive nod. "Good. Continue." No excitement, no pride, just another instruction. It bothered me, more than I could say. That night I sat alone in my room, my eyes fixed on the little red light of the security camera blinking in the corner. It was never off. It was never covered. Even when I slept, I felt like I was being watched. Why so much security? Why was this mansion so eerily quiet? And where was Zion's mother? I had never seen her, not even a photograph. One night, a massive storm rolled across the sky. Thunder rattled the windows and rain hammered against the glass. Zion couldn't sleep. He knocked on my door, clutching a little toy rabbit, trembling from head to toe. The loud sounds were overwhelming for his autism. I pulled him into my room and we sat on the floor together while I whispered calming stories. He rested his head on my shoulder, trusting me completely. Hours passed. The storm finally faded into a distant rumble. Zion fell asleep beside me, his little hand clutching my sleeve. It was 2:13 a.m. I quietly opened the door to take him back to his room, and I froze. The hallway was pitch dark. All the lights were off. There were no guards. There was no sound at all, except footsteps, slow, heavy, too heavy for a human. My heart leaped into my throat. I held Zion closer. "Hello?" I whispered into the darkness. No answer. The footsteps stopped, right outside my door. Then, silence. A complete, unnatural silence that was more terrifying than the sound itself. I shut the door instantly and fumbled with the lock. My breath was shaking in my chest. I peered through the peephole. No one. Just darkness stretching endlessly down the corridor. But the footsteps, I knew they were real. Zion suddenly woke up, tears streaming down his face, his breathing shallow and rapid, a full-blown panic attack. I held him, whispering softly until his little body calmed down and he drifted back to sleep. The next morning, when I asked a guard about the sounds, he answered way too quickly. "There was nothing. You must have heard wrong." His eyes stayed fixed straight ahead, like a soldier trained not to speak, not to see. But I wasn't convinced. That day, Zion refused to go anywhere near the hallway. He just kept pointing at my door, shaking his head and whispering something under his breath. I leaned in close to hear him. "Who was there, Zion?" He swallowed, his eyes filling with pure terror. "Monster," he whispered. "Big." Those were the first words he had ever spoken. My blood turned to ice. When I tried to report this to Mr. Hassan, his guards physically blocked my path. "Sir is busy," they said, their faces like stone. Busy? He was always in the mansion. Where could he possibly be? That night I checked the hallway again. Still dark, still quiet. But I could feel it, the feeling of eyes watching me from the shadows. I decided I had to know what was going on. I snuck into the study. A wall of monitors showed every single corner of the house. I saw the kitchens, the gardens, the classrooms, and then I saw my room. I saw myself sleeping. I saw myself changing my clothes. I saw myself crying in private. They were watching my every move, every minute of every day. My hands shook as I scrolled through the past footage. I found the recording from last night, the footsteps in the hallway, my door, a dark figure standing right outside, but when I tried to zoom in, the recording cut to static. Someone had deliberately deleted that part of the footage. Suddenly, a deep voice behind me spoke, sending a jolt through my entire body. "You are not allowed in here." I spun around. Mr. Hassan stood in the doorway. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. He looked amused. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing, Miss Amara." "What is happening in this house?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Why are there cameras in bedrooms? Why did someone stand outside my door?" Mr. Hassan leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "There are things in this house you do not and cannot understand. Your only job is the boy. Remember that." His tone was soft, but underneath it was a threat I could feel like ice crawling up my spine. I returned to my room and locked the door, my heart pounding against my ribs. Zion watched me silently from the bed, sensing my fear. "Monster," he whispered again, his voice small. I swallowed hard and pulled him into a hug. This wasn't normal. This wasn't safe. But I couldn't leave him. Not like this. That night, just as I was about to fall asleep, my phone buzzed under my pillow. A text message from an unknown number. It had only one line. "You need to get out before it's too late." Amara woke with a heavy feeling in her chest. The mysterious warning message from last night still echoed in her mind, even though it had vanished from her phone. Someone inside this mansion wanted her gone. Someone knew she was in danger. All morning, she tried to act normal. She taught Zayan his spelling, read him stories, helped him with his drawings. But she started to notice things she hadn't before. Guards posted at every corner, security cameras that seemed to follow her every move, and servants who refused to meet her eyes. It was as if the walls themselves were watching. During lunch, the air was tense. As Amara ate, a young maid quietly approached the table. With a subtle movement, she slid a folded piece of paper under Amara's hand and walked away without a word. Amara's heart pounded. She waited a moment, then unfolded the paper, pretending to check her notebook. The note was short and terrifying. "Do not go near the basement. Do not ask about his mother." Her heart tightened. She had never seen Zayan's mother. Not once. There were no pictures, no mentions, nothing. It was like she'd been completely erased from the history of this house. But if she was gone, why warn Amara not to ask? What was so dangerous about a simple question? Later that evening, she found Zayan sitting silently by the window, just staring down toward the lower part of the house. He wasn't drawing or playing like he usually did. His small hands were shaking. Amara knelt beside him, her voice soft. "Zayan, what's wrong?" He didn't speak. He just pointed downward, toward the basement. Her breath caught in her throat. "Is someone there?" she whispered, almost afraid of the answer. He nodded slowly, his big eyes filled with a sadness she couldn't understand. She placed her hand gently over his. "Is it your mother?" A single tear slid down his cheek. "Mommy." In the dark. Those 4 words stabbed through Amara's chest like a shard of ice. She pulled him into a tight hug, trying to shield him from whatever horrors this house held. Something was terribly, terribly wrong here. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Amara couldn't hold back anymore. The questions, the fear, the warning, it was all too much. She needed answers. Heart pounding in her ears, she stepped out into the dark hallway and moved silently toward the basement door. The house was completely still, the air thick and heavy. But before she could reach the stairs, a hand grabbed her arm from the shadows. She gasped, ready to scream, but it was the young security guard, the one who always looked so nervous around her. His voice was a trembling whisper. "You shouldn't be here. If the wrong person sees you, you will disappear from this house, just like the others." "The others?" Amara whispered back, her blood running cold. "Who?" He shook his head, glancing nervously down the hall. "I can't talk, they record everything." He quickly pulled something from his pocket, a small black USB drive. "Hide this," he urged. "Watch it only when you're far, far away from here. It will show you the truth." Before she could even ask another question, he let go, turned and walked away, disappearing back into the shadows as if he'd never been there. Amara stood frozen for a moment, the small drive clutched in her hand. Shaking, she returned to her room and hid the USB inside her pillowcase. She checked on Zayan, who was still awake, his eyes wide with a fear he couldn't explain. "Can we leave?" he whispered, his small voice breaking her heart. "Yes," she promised, stroking his hair. "Soon." The next morning, Amara went to Zayan's room to start their lessons, but the room was empty. His toys were untouched. The curtains were drawn. His bed was perfectly made, as if he'd never even slept in it. A wave of pure fear flooded her. She searched the study, the hall, the play area. He was gone. Frantic, she rushed into the main hall just as Mr. Hassan walked in. He was wearing a perfectly ironed suit, his expression as cold and emotionless as ever. "Where is he?" Amara demanded, her voice shaking with panic. "Safe," he replied calmly, not even blinking. "He is having a routine medical checkup." Amara didn't believe him for a second. Something inside her snapped. "I want to see him. Now." Mr. Hassan turned his cold, dead eyes toward her. "You are here to follow instructions, Miss Amara, nothing more." But before she could argue, Zayan appeared at the top of the stairs. He was walking slowly, looking exhausted and pale. He saw her and ran, and she knelt to hold him as he threw his arms around her neck. He whispered into her ear, his voice faint. "Don't go downstairs, Mommy is hurt." She wiped his tears, her mind racing. She carried him toward the study room, her resolve hardening into steel. His mother was in this house, alive, and Zayan knew it. That night when the lights went out, Amara and Zayan stayed awake, sitting together in the dark. She held his hand tightly. She needed answers, and she knew there was only one place to find them: the basement. This time, she took Zayan with her. Every step down the hallway was silent, careful. When they reached the cold metal door, a keypad glowed faintly in the dark. She had no code, but Zayan, without a word, stepped forward and pressed his small thumb onto a fingerprint scanner she hadn't even noticed. With a soft click, the lock disengaged. The heavy door swung open. A cold breath of air drifted out from the darkness below, cold enough to make Amara shiver. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Holding Zayan close, she walked slowly down the stairs. This wasn't a storage room. It wasn't a wine cellar. It was a laboratory. Tables were filled with blinking equipment, monitors, wires, and strange machines humming quietly. And then she saw it. In the center of the room stood a large glass chamber. Inside it, a woman. Still, pale, motionless, connected by dozens of wires to the surrounding machines. Zayan pressed his small hand against the glass. "Mommy." Amara's breath caught. The woman wasn't dead. Her chest was moving, a shallow, barely visible rise and fall. Someone was keeping her alive, a prisoner in this secret high-tech tomb. Before she could process the horror, a calm, cold voice spoke from behind them. "You were not supposed to see this." She spun around. It wasn't Mr. Hassan. It was someone else entirely. A tall, imposing man with piercing gray eyes staring at her as if she were an insect he was about to crush. Zayan's mother was a problem, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "She tried to take him away from this house. We couldn't allow that." Amara's voice shook, but she stood her ground. "She's his mother. You can't keep her like this." "She belongs here," the man replied coldly. "And now, so do you." From the shadows, guards stepped forward, blocking the stairs, their only way out. Amara held Zayan's hand tighter. This mansion was not a home. It was a prison, and the real monster wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was standing right in front of them. The days that followed were like watching a stubborn winter finally give way to a gentle spring. Liam's transformation wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow, quiet bloom. He began to use small words, tiny fragments of speech that were like precious gems to everyone who heard them. During reading time, he no longer hid in his corner but sat beside Maya, his small body a comforting presence next to hers. One afternoon, in a moment that made the entire mansion staff hold their breath, he even let his father sit beside him on the sofa, a silent truce that spoke volumes. It felt like witnessing a miracle, a possibility they had long given up on. But the quiet progress was soon punctuated by a moment of profound revelation. One evening, Maya entered the study to find Mr. Harrison sitting alone in the dim light. He wasn't working. He was staring at an old faded photograph, his eyes red and heavy as if he hadn't slept in days. He looked haunted. "Is everything okay?" Maya asked softly, not wanting to intrude but unable to ignore his distress. He took a long, shuddering breath, the sound echoing in the silent room. "You deserve to know something," he said, his voice raspy. He gestured toward the photo on his desk. It showed a beautiful woman with kind eyes, holding a newborn baby swaddled in blankets. "That's Liam's mother." Maya sat down quietly, sensing this was a story that needed to be told, not pride. She waited. "She passed away when Liam was just 2 years old," he began, his voice unsteady, cracking under the weight of memory. "And from that day on, he just stopped speaking. The doctor said it was trauma, selective mutism. I hired the best experts, the most renowned therapists from around the world. But nothing worked. Nothing reached him. Maya listened, her heart aching for the little boy and the broken man in front of her. "I shut myself down," he confessed, the words tumbling out as if a dam had finally broken. "I became strict, cold. I thought discipline was the answer, that if I could control everything around him, I could somehow fix him." His voice broke and he looked away, ashamed. But it only made him afraid of me. Maya placed a gentle hand on the polished surface of the table, a small gesture of support. "Trauma doesn't respond to force," she said, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. "It responds to love." For a long moment, silence filled the room again. Then, Mr. Harrison looked at her, his eyes swimming with a mixture of guilt and gratitude. "I fired you because I thought you were too emotional," he admitted. "But I was wrong. Emotions, they were exactly what he needed all along." Just as the weight of his confession settled between them, a small sound came from the hallway. Liam stood in the doorway, a silent observer. He walked slowly toward the desk, his eyes fixed on the photograph. He reached out a tiny finger and gently touched the face of the woman in the picture, his mother. Then he did something that shattered the remaining walls around his father's heart. He leaned his head against Mr. Harrison's arm. In a voice so quiet it was almost a thought, he whispered, "Daddy." "Sad?" Mr. Harrison covered his mouth with his hand, but he couldn't stop the sob that escaped. Tears, hot and unrestrained, fell freely. "Yes," he choked out. "Daddy was sad." In response, Liam wrapped his small arms around his father's waist in a small, careful hug. It was the first one in years, a bridge built across an ocean of unspoken grief. Maya quietly turned away, giving the father and son a private moment that had been waiting far, far too long to arrive. Later that night, after a dinner that felt lighter and warmer than any before, Liam did something completely unexpected. He took Maya's hand with a determined grip and led her down a long, dusty hallway no one ever used. At the very end was a small, unassuming wooden door. He pushed it open. Inside was a tiny hidden room, a secret world frozen in time. The space was filled with toys, paintings, and countless drawings taped to the walls. Some were torn, others coated in a fine layer of dust, but every single one depicted the same smiling woman, Liam's mother. "This safe place," Liam said, his voice soft but clear. "Mommy room." Maya looked around, her heart clenching. Every picture was a captured memory. His mother reading to him, his mother feeding him, his mother hugging him. It all made sense now. This is why he never connected with anyone, Maya realized aloud. He locked himself away in a place where she was still alive. Liam walked over to a small shelf and picked up a drawing, a child's messy crayon creation of a little boy holding a woman's hand. He held it out to Maya. "Keep with you." Maya felt her heart drop. This was his most precious treasure. "Liam, are you sure?" He nodded, his gaze firm. "You help." Bending down, she wrapped him in a gentle hug. For the first time, Liam didn't pull away. He closed his eyes and leaned into her embrace. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice a little stronger than before. "Read here." So Maya sat on the old carpeted floor, leaned against the wall of memories, and opened a storybook. Liam lay down beside her, his head resting on her arm. And for the first time in years, surrounded by the loving ghosts of his past and the warm presence of his future, he fell asleep peacefully. From the doorway, Mr. Harrison watched them, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the hall. No words he could say could add to the sacredness of this moment. He simply whispered, "Maya, thank you." But Maya knew this wasn't the end. Healing wasn't one single, miraculous moment. It was every moment that followed. The next morning, the mansion staff noticed something new. Liam walked through the grand house holding Maya's hand, not hiding from their gazes but offering tiny nods of greeting. He even approached the head maid as she dusted a vase and whispered, "Morning." It was a small word, but it was enough to make her burst into tears of joy. Word began to spread through the city's elite circles. The billionaire's silent child was changing. Some called it luck. Others called it a miracle. But those within the mansion walls who saw the way Maya looked at him the way he looked at her knew the simple truth. Liam had found his voice because, for the first time, someone had truly listened to his silence. And the mansion, once so quiet and heavy with sorrow, finally began to feel full of warmth. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. If it touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more content that we hope will brighten your day. We'll see you in the next one.